Okay, everybody comfortable? Cell phone's off, right? Okay, here we go.
From Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and the palatial FYC studios, you are listening to All Things Considered,
the podcast where we ask you to consider all things as opposed to presenting you with a masterpiece or museum piece for your consideration. I switched it up, motherfucker.
You did.
I'm your host, Dustin Friesenan.
And I'm Mike Josic, and we'd like to give a shout out to everybody catching the show on YouTube, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, all other good podcast providers, and of course, iTunes. And if you are catching the show off of iTunes, whether you're downloading or streaming it, while you're there, if you want to do us a solid, rate and review the show. It's a really important step for getting the show noticed in the Apple Podcasts hierarchy. The more ratings and reviews that we have, the easier it is for us to come up in searches for people looking for film commentary podcasts or film podcasts, TV and movie podcasts. FYC might show up before that other FYC show.
Given that you've explained this at the beginning of every episode for like the last year.
But every episode could be someone's first episode, Dustin.
It could be, but it is 20 seconds of time that we are wasting of theirs. I always feel bad about it. That's okay, I'm going to be edited out here to save on that time.
You never know. If you've heard the show before, welcome back. If this is your first time listening to the show, beware. As always, because we have hearts, black hearts of coal.
And because you can't really talk about a movie without talking about the movie.
Spoilers ahead. So on this week of the show, this is the first time we're doing this. This is the first time we're trying our third new format change. This is the double feature recommend show of All Things Considered. Basically, we just split the recommend shows off of the main show with the theatrical release. And these are going to be coming out every Thursday after the new movie, ATC.
We're trying things out. Let us know how it goes.
Throwing the spaghetti against the wall, seeing if it sticks. And on this episode, the two movies that we've chosen to discuss, the movies that we have recommended to each other, are 2016's Free Fire from Ben Wheatley,
and 2005's The Call of Cthulhu by the Lovecraft Historical Society, as directed by Andrew Lehman. And there was a coin flip that happened before this recording, the recording of the words I'm saying right now, but during the recording technically, that Mike lost? Won?
I won.
Mike goes first this time.
So the film that I chose, as I said, was 2016's Free Fire from Ben Wheatley.
Here he is.
Don't like his jumper.
Thanks for coming out.
About the small talk. Let's buy some guns, eh?
So, what do you say we check out the merch?
Come out, wherever you are.
Is that what we ordered?
You're a little bit rude, eh? Chirping the bird there.
He says it's not what he ordered.
I ordered M16s.
Really? I'm not running a pizza delivery service. You want the weapons or you don't want the weapons? What the fuck is that accent?
Oh, I think it's like Swiss or something.
Austrian.
Desert Austrian.
You're a dead man, Berlin!
Come here, you!
I'll fucking shoot!
Stop shooting, man! Oh, now we're cooking!
Holy Jesus!
I forgot whose side I'm on! Smell of perfume! Fuck! It's beard oil! I'm gonna blow your head off! You seem like a nice girl.
We can't all be nice girls.
This was a movie that I knew nothing about other than who directed it and who starred in it. I'm a big Cillian Murphy fan. I had just seen Ben Wheatley's High Rise, and to find out he had another movie, it was going to be a period film in the 70s, it was going to be with Cillian Murphy, it was going to be kind of a heist-like movie. I was in. I was all in. I didn't need to know anything more about it. And watching it was such an experience because it's not a heist movie. It's a
Mexican standoff movie, if anything.
What's a gun sale? It's an arms deal. It's not a heist movie. It's an arms deal movie where an arms deal goes wrong and you essentially get 60 minutes of a firefight. And that sounds ridiculous.
And it is. Don't get us wrong.
But it works. It works on so many levels. Wheatley and co-writer Amy Jump do such a good job, in my opinion, of keeping the action moving, of keeping the characters interesting, changing things as far as setting. And there's a lot of little things like, since bullets are flying, everybody is staying very close to the ground. So much of this movie is shot at ground level. And it's fascinating to me. And there's a lot of character moments that come out of it. There's a lot of fun action. There's a lot of bizarre, macabre humor. I enjoyed it immensely. And instantly after turning it off, I was like, okay, I'm giving this movie to Dustin. I'm like, Dustin, have you seen Free Fire? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, it's the next movie.
Just drops it off beside me. And that was a month ago, and the movie he chose changed about 3 times from there, but due to technical difficulties and my having seen another film.
Well, I did change it to sound of my voice because I thought that would be funner to talk about. But then you're like, oh, wait, I've seen that movie. So we're back to Free Fire.
Back to Free Fire.
And do you regret it, Dustin?
Not at all. This movie was very much amusing, and it had me caring what was going on, especially with the who lives, who dies. And in the who dies section, I was not disappointed. That's always important to me. But one thing I definitely loved and appreciated about the movie is how real it felt. Like, it's not action-packed. It's not people jumping and rolling over stuff and shooting 15 bullets and running and diving. And no, like, people are firing wildly and hitting nothing. People are grazed. Everybody gets shot, but they get... it's not like center of mass all the time.
That's one of my favorite things about the movie, is that at some point everyone gets shot, and in some cases it's in the stupidest way possible.
Yeah, so at one point...
your favorite character, Ord, gets shot by his own guy.
There's so many times people get shot by their own guy because they don't know what they're doing and they don't know who shot who.
They see a body come running out from behind a pole or something. They don't know if it's...
They fire wildly.
Yeah.
And that's what feels so real and so natural about this. Statistics say that 30% of gunshot wounds are those... Like, that's your fatality range right there. And these guys, they're getting shot in the legs, they're getting shot in the arms, there's grazes, there's the headshot that happens early on.
I love the distinction. I love the fact that, like you said, there are grazes, there are shots to sort of non-fatal areas, and Armie Hammy's character, Ord, fantastic character.
Love that character, best character.
I love the fact that, as an actor, his name is Armie Hammer, which is kind of an implausible name, and his character's name is Ord, which is also an implausible name. But yeah, his character tells Charlton Copley's character, Vern, he's got about an hour and a half. That's the golden rule. If you're shot and you're not shot in an artery or a severely fatal area, you've got about an hour and a half to get where you need to go before you bleed out, which was sort of meta and interesting because the movie's about an hour and a half.
Though even those numbers I'd question a little bit. It would all depend on where you're shot, but they do have those kind of golden little rules. 5 minutes for this, 20 minutes for that. But I love their stupid bickering as well. Like, that's what half of this movie is. People shouting at each other from behind cover, getting angry at each other. The only reason Justine gets shot is an accident from some other douchebag, and then they shoot at each other just sort of out of bitter spite at that point, despite the fact that they were effectively on the same side. And then Vernon's a complete tool because everyone's like, hey, she's going to leave. She was the broker. She'll just calm things down, call our guys, and we'll just sort of walk out of here. Vern's like, nope, she betrayed us. Starts shooting at her. She shoots back. See? She's betrayed us. She's shooting at us because you're shooting at her. You shot her, you asshole.
These are all kind of reprehensible characters. I mean, it's a group of guys buying guns for the IRA, and it's a bunch of arms dealers. They're all sort of on the wrong side of the law, and things escalate because of something that happened the previous night between two of the characters who had no idea that they had this connection to this deal that was happening the next day.
Steve-O, and fuck Steve-O, decided he wanted to get head from somebody. When she said no, He busted a bottle on her face. Her cousin beat the shit out of him, rightfully so. That cousin happened to be at this arms deal. And so, yeah, Steve-O gets beaten. He gets shot the most. He lives almost the longest, but ends up dying anyway. So he gets to be in the most pain. So I appreciate that. 'Cause fuck Steve-O.
And I think those things are sort of worked into the story, too, because Vern, who's one of the more despicable characters among the bunch, he has an unpleasant death. Steve-O has an unpleasant death. But the only person who has kind of an unpleasant death who maybe didn't deserve it was Leary, who was one of the friends of the IRA guys who comes in later, and he gets the crowbar through the face, and then he just gets, like, beaten down by Harry. And
what about Ralph? Because, like, the leader of the IRA, he wasn't a bad guy either. Was it Ralph?
You mean Frank?
Frank.
Frank just died from gunshots, though.
He died from gunshots, but...
I meant, like, the people who sort of seemed to deserve more pain got uglier deaths. Everybody else just basically got shot.
And even at the very end, when Ord and Chris, like, they were sort of buddy-buddy, was Ord, Chris, and Justine at the very end, only survivors. Ord's like, hey, want to go out and get a drink? Because this is fucking stupid. And I like, in these kind of films, everyone's reprehensible. Everyone's bad. Some people are usually worse. You got your Verns, you got your Steve-Os. Fuck those guys. But I like the professional characters. Ord is professional. He's very reasonable. He's calm in the situation. He's not firing wildly.
He wears beard oil.
Wears beard oil. And that's the kind of thing that I appreciate. Those are the kind of characters that I tend to gravitate towards. And you've got the two most professional characters, the ones who tried to calm things down, the ones who tried to get a clean grasp of the situation, even after the betrayal by Martin, I love when he gets up and he starts wandering around. He's shot in the head. He's like, I'm not shooting at you while shooting at them. You don't know if it's brain damage. You don't know if it's him just being angry. Even earlier on when he's like, I'm not dead. I'm just resting up. He comes up and he's just walking in the middle, standing right in front of everybody, just being completely insane. And
this movie makes time for those insane moments. And you have to. When you have a story that's literally 60 to 70 minutes or so of just...
Mexican standoff, gunfire and shooting, crawling around on the floor. You have to change things up. You have to move the setting a little bit. You know, there's that little bit where they crawl upstairs to get the phone. They change the environment by blowing up those helium tanks or oxygen tanks. Even at the very, very end, after everything has happened and the sprinklers go off, it's just another thing to sort of change the environment a little bit. And the fact that they have these moments where people are reloading their guns, they're shouting insults back and forth, they're sort of repositioning. Other characters take these moments to do other things. It changes the pace a little bit, and it keeps you going the entire time. Yeah. Very well put together. I'd actually highly recommend this to anyone.
And I don't think that's an easy movie to put together, too.
No. They even managed to keep the confusion with all the low shots. You're not ever too sure who's near who until they separate to go up to get the phone, which is a telemarketer.
Frank's end comes because of a telemarketer.
Those are the only people where you know where they are in relation to everyone else. Everyone else, because of the constant scrambling around, the low camera shots maintains the confusion for you, the viewer, as well.
And it really helps with when you're doing the low shots and you've got characters who are standing and moving around. You sort of get that sense that the other characters have, where you don't know who that person is initially, sort of when they show up. Well done, Ben Wheatley. High Rise was a bit of a mindfuck. This was a nice palate cleanser. Now I have to go watch that Field in England movie and see if it's as dumb as I've heard.
Dumb in a good way or dumb in a bad way?
I've heard dumb in a bad way.
Ooh.
But I've also heard people say that Free Fire was dumb, so...
Lots of people are dumb. True story.
True story. Just go back and listen to our solo episode if you...
We have opinions about dumbness. And so with two rousing, this is a good movie that people should see, we'll move on to Call of Cthulhu. This film, I forget exactly where or how I found it, probably just because I was on a bit of a Cthulhu kick. I wanted to find any Lovecraft sort of films that I could and watch them all because I like horror, and especially like this kind of horror, more psychological, more mythological, something that's not just slasher, you know? And so I found this film, which was made by the Lovecraft Historical Society, to look like a silent film from the 20s. And it's a much shorter film, only about 45, 50 minutes or so, going over the old story, The Call of Cthulhu. And I thought it was very interesting what they were trying to do with it. Seeing it again, it doesn't quite feel like a silent film. Some of the makeup's not as great. They could have overcranked it, as Mike complained about. But I like what they were going for, and I feel that in telling the story as a story within a story, possibly within another story, because you have a researcher talking about his grandfather's notes, which tell the story of the sole survivor of a boat trip, on top of all these other stories, these loosely connected stories to this Cthulhu cult. And it just gives this idea of this otherworldly presence that's sort of on the outside of our own reality that we kind of want to ignore because there's nothing good there. There's nothing we can do about it, and you might as well just live in ignorance, because that's the best outcome you can hope for, and that's the feel that the film gives, and that's sort of Lovecraft distilled down to its essence. And I thought they pulled that away pretty good, regardless of any sort of amateurish feel that the film has, as it is done by a historical society, which sort of just does this kind of stuff for fun, as opposed to a much more professional get-up. And so I recommended it to Mike, and what did Mike think?
Mike was very intrigued. Mike had heard about this film, and Mike liked the idea of the high-concept approach, trying to do a modern sort of take on a silent film. Interestingly enough, much like the other two films that you recommended to me in this series of recommendations we've been giving each other, I didn't care much for the beginning, and I very much got on board with the end. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that in the beginning it was really amateur. And the irony there is that the beginning stuff is all the people just sitting around and talking to each other. The ending stuff is when the freaking Elder God comes out and attacks the ship, and there's all this like special effects and crazy expressionist sets. That all actually worked.
That felt like an old school film.
It really, really did. And the fact that they had difficulty pulling off these dialogue scenes, it didn't feel like a silent film. It felt like a bunch of guys in their basement. Despite having some decent production value, the camera work, the staging of it, the blocking of it, just didn't work. So many characters just literally sitting in a chair with title cards coming up telling you kind of what they're saying. They needed to move around. They needed to stand up. They needed to do something to make it interesting. You have a silent
Gesticulate?
film. You have a silent film. There's no words. You're relying on the pictures. You have to communicate with the pictures. Now, I'll grant you, this was made by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. These aren't real invested filmmakers, perhaps. I don't know anything about the creators of the film beyond what I've seen. But it feels like they kind of did some research on how to make a silent film and kind of not. They're sort of harkening back, sort of not. I think it would have been super easy to just crank up the speed a little bit, because that would have super enhanced the look of it. And you also said that this movie took like 14 months to make. And I kind of get the sense that maybe they shot that early stuff, like it might have been done in sequence. And the earlier stuff was done early and the later stuff was done later. Because the later stuff does feel more accomplished. I would almost say that there was another director doing the later stuff. Even the actions felt a little bit more silent film later in the movie.
You definitely had some actors who knew how to do the silent film acting, and some who didn't.
It's super high concept, choosing it to do it this way. I think they succeeded in some ways, and I think they failed in other ways. I think because it was high concept, I was maybe holding it up to a slightly higher yardstick. I thought the Cthulhu effects were cool. I thought all the stuff with the ship and the sets, the dream scenes. I guess if I had to nail it down to like two things that bothered me the most about this movie, it's the cinematography. The images at the beginning were too clear, and the shot choices were a little too modern. And the other would be the amount of writing on the title cards. Seemed like they were squeezing a ton in, and I thought they flashed by rather quickly. So I don't know. I felt kind of conflicted because I liked what they were going for, but I didn't really like the movie. And on a first viewing, on a second viewing, having seen it and absorbed it and knowing what to expect, a second viewing might be more pleasurable than a first. But on a first viewing, didn't love it. And the other two movies, Vidoc and Triangle, that you recommended, I started off being like, Dustin, why did you tell me to watch this terrible stuff? And then I ended up liking them, and I liked what they were trying to do. And they were both high-concept movies. And I thought they both kind of achieved what they wanted to in the end. I feel like this did achieve what they wanted to in the end, but...
Not as well.
The beginning was just... It was too much for me to forgive it. So, yeah, unfortunately, I probably would only recommend this to, like, a super H.P. Lovecraft fan. So yeah, anyways, I feel bad.
There is no need to feel bad.
Because you enjoyed Free Fire.
I also like to pick movies that are a little bit further out there, it seems, when it comes to whether or not you'd like them. I like my high concept recommends. So I'm willing to take that risk that you might not like it.
Oh, as am I. And so, that's how we've come down on these two films. That is double recommend for Free Fire.
And a bit more of a, if you like your Cthulhu stuff, your Lovecraftian horror, then check out Call of Cthulhu, but otherwise, maybe not. And even I would agree to that.
Or if you don't know anything about silent film, because you said that now that you've seen more silent films...
This is true.
This one plays a little bit worse because you see the style more and where their shortcomings are. But
which is amusing because a lot of silent film methods were weirdly adapted theatrical methods that we're just sort of used to now, so it's almost a point of snobbery.
So that's our take on Free Fire and Call of Cthulhu. As we always try to do on our All Things Considered episodes, we tell you guys that if you comment on our boards and walls and emails and whatnot, we'll give you a shout out on the show, and that's what we're going to do right now. So I want to thank Dima S. for posting on our Starship Troopers episode, and the Canon Hara, who commented, this guy saying Evil Dead doesn't have gore. What, you kidding me? Granted, the effects aren't as good or realistic, but it's still bloody and gory. I went back and I listened to the episode, which was our Thing episode, and I think ultimately what we were trying to say is that the original Evil Dead, it wasn't all that gory. It was more of a straight kind of horror suspense film. It had a couple of horror, like, gory moments, but it wasn't gory in the sense that Evil Dead 2 is gory. There weren't, like, fountains of blood and stuff. It was a lot more modest. So it's not that the movie wasn't gory at all. Anyways, just wanted to throw that out there.
And thanks to Taco Figo, who commented on Metropolis, as well as Mr. Peace Pirate, even though he apparently was just annoyed with the thing, so it's not a universally loved film, apparently. But it's always good to have those alternate viewpoints, because otherwise how are you going to have a proper conversation? And
a shout out to Mario Riestra, who commented that he agreed the original Martyrs was a great film. We completely agree with you, in your
100%.
agreement with our agreement. He said the acting and effects were believable as hell. It had a dark atmosphere. The plot was definitely something new and unpredictable. It's nice to actually get a comment on The Martyrs, since The Martyrs was...
one that we consider to be wholly underappreciated.
And we also got a comment on our Thing episode by No One Commented.
By no one, you mean? Esteban Gunn responding to Vertigo, talking about how it eventually grew on them, where it managed to fall off of us, I suppose. And to Michael Mead for correcting us on our French Connection commentary vis-a-vis the car chase.
I actually went back and listened to the French Connection. I mean, when somebody calls you out.
Oh, yeah.
You've got to check it out. I have yet to actually listen to the audio commentary where Friedkin... I remember listening to it years ago, and what we said in the episode was that I'm sure that it wasn't completely off the cuff, that it wasn't completely, like, unplanned, and really Michael Mead is just basically saying, a little more specifically, how the stunt was achieved, that they went back to it. That was like one single shot where they did the quick buzz through. That was the one they did without permits. And then there was the Gene Hackman scene, shooting the stuff of him driving. So it was a stuntman who was driving. It wasn't Gene Hackman doing it.
It is true that we don't do a whole mess load of research before every single episode. We do some, and we have a conversation where we don't always have all the pieces. And sometimes we forget things we wanted to say. Sometimes we bring up things that honestly deserve a bit more thought and respite beforehand.
That happens so often that like there's a list of things I want to talk about when I come to the microphone, and then it's not until I'm editing it where I'm like, wait, that's not in the show?
And that's an important part of keeping the conversation going. You get sidetracked, stuff happens. And yes, we will make mistakes, or we will be vague about stuff we don't know about. And absolutely, correct us and call us out when we do.
And another shout out to Chris Gaffrey, who commented on our Thing episode, and Tiffany Clark, who was really excited by our My Own Private Idaho episode, commented multiple times, both on YouTube and Facebook. A lot of activity. Thanks for that, Tiffany.
And thanks for your comments, Simon Truss and Panan Corvo da Tempestade, who commented on Alien and City of God, respectively.
And last but not least, Sexy Lollies and Yusuf Endur commented on our Thing episode, and Yusuf got a bit of a kick out of our "it's fun, just not in an ET kind of way" comment.
Whereas Sexy Lollies, I would have actually been like, calm down, you.
Sexy Lollies can take a chill pill.
Calm down. People are allowed their opinions.
So that's everybody. That's all our comments. That brings us completely up to date, which is unusual. Thanks everybody for your comments. We love hearing from you. The YouTube channel has been alive with chatter, which has been fantastic. We'd like to see more of you on like Facebook and Twitter, but no pressure.
And be sure to join us next week when we will check out Mike's next newest pick, which will be
Billy Wilder's The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. Looking forward to that one. And be sure to check out all the other social media that we're on. Check out our WordPress blog. Check out our Patreon account. We did a big talk about Patreon on the last episode featuring Solo, a Star Wars story. If you didn't catch that one, maybe go check that out. We gave kind of a rundown of the campaign and what the reward levels are. Support the show. Like, share, follow, subscribe. And we have a new sponsor on the show, which we introduced on the last ATC with Solo, a Star Wars story. And who would that be, Dustin?
That would be Audible, which is a audiobook.
I believe the world's largest provider of audiobook content. They've got a deal where you can sign up for a 30-day free trial. You get a free audiobook.
And if you do so at audibletrial.com/FYC show, we get a little bit of that sweet Skrilla, and you don't actually have to pay nothing. You just get a free book. If you don't like the system, you get to keep the book, and all is good.
And just a quick recommend, since we're talking about H.P. Lovecraft and Call of Cthulhu on this episode, Audible's got a number of H.P. Lovecraft and Call of Cthulhu books, including Call of Cthulhu and Other Stories and The Call of Cthulhu, which could be your free book for this month. So if you've been thinking about Audible, we would love it if you checked it out. That also helps us out. Anything you can do to help out the show, you have our gratitude.
Short of maybe killing our competitors, that might be going a little too far. We're not allowed to legally condone that.
Or legally ask for that.
Luckily, you can't see our winking on this side of the screen.
I have heard from a number of people, a lot of comments we get. People are saying, you guys deserve way more attention than you're getting. Your channel should have more clicks or more subscribers. I think it's just a matter of, I think when people find us, they really like the show. It's just a matter of, there's a lot of white noise out there. There's so many. Basically, we've joked about how there's more podcasters than podcast listeners, and probably the majority of those podcasters have a film podcast. It's a genre that is quite saturated.
If we get discovered, it'll be through the magic of whatever metrics somebody uses. And that's why Mike keeps hounding on, help us with the metrics.
It's going to be just some sort of weird chaos magic that I think gets us noticed.
Some sort of prayer to the old ones.
There you go, elder gods.
Don't get them to notice us. Nothing good ever happens from that. Please, don't mention us in the phone call when you call Cthulhu.
The Call of Cthulhu?
Hey, guys.
Don't pick up!
I'm in the house.
There's actually a movie called Call Girl of Cthulhu. I saw that and I was like, I feel Dustin probably knows about this one.
I do not, but I'm interested. You've piqued my curiosity.
That will not be featured on next week's episode.
Not if I can help it.
All right, take care, guys. Thanks so much for checking us out. We will see you next week on a regular episode of For Your Consideration. I've been your host, Mike.
And I've been Dustin.
Cheers.
Slanty.
And last but not least, Sexy Lolis commented on our...
Sexy lollies.
You're probably right.
Oh, I'm right. I spend enough time in the gutters of the internet. I know exactly what this person is saying with their thing there.